This is Jeff St Laurent. This is my live Tuesday call. Welcome everyone. I'm excited as always for what we're about to do. And today's topic is how to effectively schedule your business day. And it's a hot topic because, especially as you start really getting into your business or at least becoming serious about your business, we've got to find a way where we're able to stay consistent and focused on the items. And it's also understanding the items that we need to do as well. So with that being said, we're going to jump into that in just a minute. Just a couple things to take care of before we get rolling. I do record all these calls, and so I post them on Fridays in my university. So on my website, which is sellingcoaching.com. So if you go to sellingcoaching.com under the university, you'll see my live Tuesday call recordings there. And then also I've got in the university a lot of shorter videos as well. They're all education based as I help coaches transition to a full-time business. So a lot of great, fantastic information in there, if I can say that myself. Use the search feature, type in some keywords, see what pops up, because you can easily get lost, just listening to stuff. And I always tell coaches, it's like, hey, focus on where you need to be right now. There's a lot of things, but where are you at right now in the next one or two steps? And if you need some, education around that, use the search feature to maybe find some great information that can help you out there. So that's my mission there as I help coaches transition to full time. Also on my website, sellingcoaching.com, another great place to connect with me is in my private Facebook group. So at the top of the page, there's a banner there that says, join my private Facebook group. So if you want to check that out and if you want to join, just click to join. I'd love to have you there. Do a lot of great things. One of the biggest things I love doing there is with the coaches is helping give them a voice. I do a lot with videos. Got a visibility challenge going on always. We're challenging the coaches to create 30 videos over 91 days. And it's just a matter of, it's got to get out there and speak your voice, just like I'm doing on my Tuesday call. We've got to have those weekly live events. If you're not speaking in front of people, you're not going to be growing your audience. You're not going to be getting paying clients, whether you do one-on-one groups or even if you sell programs, you've got to be growing that audience. So speaking your voice is a great thing. So love to have you in that private Facebook group as well. And then right on the homepage of sellingcoaching.com, I have a great ultimate startup guide for new coaches. So if you go there right there, you can enter your name and email address. That will give you that guide. And that also what that does is it puts you on my email community. And the reason I always suggest coaches to get on there, it's a great way to not only just keep up with what I'm doing with my calls or recordings and things like that, but more importantly, if you're really looking to transition to full time, you've got to understand how to use email and how to use email to stay in front of your audience. So all my clients, I make sure I'm like, you've got to get on my email list. And it's not a ploy to get people on my email list. If you want on it, you get on it. If not, no big deal. But the reason I say that is because I want you to start to see how I role model my email marketing and how I stay in touch with my audience 3 times a week and how that all works. So in addition, obviously you can get that startup guide. So those are the things I have for you in terms of keeping in touch with me, getting in my circle, staying in touch, and helping you move to transition to full time wherever you're at. But for now, we're going to rock into the topic, and that's how to effectively schedule your business day. And the people that call in live, one of the benefits of calling in live is I get to hear from them in terms of what do you want answered? What are the things, that you're looking for? And really of the people that spoke up, it's a very common thread of, it's with all the things I need to do, right? It's is there a right way? Is there a wrong way? How do I most effectively do this? If I'm following up, is there a certain time of day that's best for that, et cetera? So let me get into this. And first I'll say this, preface it with anything and saying, there's never a right or wrong in terms of scheduling. However, what we do need to make sure we're doing is, number one, is we need to make sure we identify what I would call revenue producing activities in our business. So revenue producing activities in our business, meaning those which will produce revenue, right? So working on my website per se is not going to produce me revenue. Yes, ultimately, it can, if I set it up and I got good lead caption or I'm driving traffic to it, and then I follow up on that, it has a hand in, getting revenue. However, at the end of the day, actively getting yourself out there speaking in front of people, that's a revenue producing activity. Following up with people, those are revenue producing activities. So it's making sure we identify which are the ones that are vital elements that we have in our day every day that we're consistent on. And then what are the other elements that, while obviously we need to do them, invoicing or billing or finances or anything like that, they need to get done, but when they need to get done isn't as urgent as making sure that the other activities get done. So those are just a couple things for foundational element. And even answering right off the bat of, is there a right or wrong time, for following up with people, et cetera? It's like, well, no, there's not a right or wrong time. Other than, well, if you're doing it at 6 a.m. and no one's up, or if you're calling people, then maybe that's not a good time. So you have to just consider, what time, what type of follow-up you're doing. Virtual follow-up as well. There's not necessarily a great time per se, but it's just a matter of, like, the question is, are you doing it? That's the more the important piece. And one of the elements I want to bring in today is also how we operate the best based on our schedule. So let me start this whole thing off in the sense of, when it comes to scheduling, one of the foundational elements that I have found has worked very well for myself and clients that I've helped with my one-on-one mentoring is the philosophy, if you will, that we really want to treat our business like a job. And for some of you are like, oh, I don't want a job though. I want to be an entrepreneur. The thing that I want to bring out with that is when you have a job, typically you have hours at your job, whether they're the same or they fluctuate every week, but whatever. If I have to go into my job today at 9 a.m. and I'm done at 5 p.m., let's say, when do I show up? I hopefully will show up every morning at 9 a.m. And when do I leave? Most likely, come 5 o'clock, I'm out the door, So with our business, that's the element that I want you to treat it as is, I'm a big advocate of having business hours. And this is whether you've got a full-time job and you're doing the coaching on the side as you start to grow it, or you're fortunate enough to this is what I've got in front of my plate, whether I'm earning full-time income or not. I have my coaching business and I'm growing it, and I have more time, if you will. I have nothing else on my plate during my day, for instance. So wherever you're at time-wise, scheduling your business hours are vitally important, and knowing when you're working and when you're not working. That's the biggest thing, because throughout our world we have our business, but then it's like, we have relationships, and we have hopefully health and our fitness and whatever other things that are important to us there, whether we're parents, etc. And so we have to realize is that if we're going to be successful with our business, we need to know what our focus is. And so is right now our focus business? Or is it family, right? Or is it fun? And so I'm a real big advocate of, blocking off your day into what are my business hours? So, and that's one of the first things I'll do with people as well, is if that's a challenge of theirs, is when are your business hours? The thing I'll say about it is your business hours, it doesn't mean every single day they have to be 9 to 5, etc. See what works for you. And when I say what works for you is start to understand how you function best. As an example, in the morning, I can't get up at I don't bounce out of bed at 5:36 in the morning and I'm ready to go. I could have some time, let's say, to do business then, but I don't want to get up. I used to get up early. It's I don't function well at that time. So it's I get up in the morning, I don't do that. So I choose to have my mornings I have my son in the morning. I spend time with him, get him off to school, and then I do my workouts. I come home, shower, and I start my days at 11 o'clock. Some people are like, oh my God, 11 o'clock. I could never start at 11 o'clock. I'm an early bird. So the point is no right or wrong, but what I've learned is the great, when you can honor how you operate, that's the important piece. So because I honor how I operate, I can have my morning routine, I can have my exercise, I can do that, because I know if working out for later on in the afternoon or night for me, just doesn't work. I'll either not do it or I just won't get as good a workout in. So that's how I structure my day around that, and I start and finish my business hours. So I'm throwing that as an example to you, is I want you to start to understand and honor that. Now, if you're fortunate enough where you don't have a job, for instance, you might have more flexibility. If you have a job, well, now there's probably less flexibility. And that's where you might not have the luxury of not liking early morning. So if let's say I had a full-time job where I got up in the morning, I had my son, and then I had to go to work for let's say 9 a.m. instead of my workout. And if I worked till 5 p.m. and I still valued my health and fitness and I had to work out, maybe I go from work to work out, and then I come home, and then let's say I'm with my family or I have some dinner, and now it's 8 o'clock at night. I might not have the flexibility of like, well, I don't want to work out in the morning, or I don't blah, blah, blah. It's like, why might I have to get my ass out of bed at 5 a.m. And work from, 5 to 7 and then pick up there with my son and go from there. And then at night, it's 8 o'clock and I'm probably wiped out and tired, but I need to know what nights am I going into my office and for how long? Am I working from 8 to 10? So these are the business hours. And I'm trying to not only just say, hey, set business hours, but what's going to help you be successful around that is when you set business hours, but you set them understanding how you operate best. And then also with taking into account any luxuries you have, meaning if your time is fairly flexible, or if you have other restrictions like jobs and other responsibilities that are at certain times, then you've got to obviously make some sacrifices around that. So with that being said, that's going to help you honor those business hours. And in terms of how many business hours, I don't want you to focus, when we talk about scheduling right now, I don't want you to focus on quantity, like, we compare it to what's a full-time job, 40 hours a week, right? People work a lot more, some people work less, depending on the occupation. Let's not focus on volume. If you want numbers, I'll give you numbers just to give you numbers, so you do get an idea. So it's not just a random, well, I can work whatever. Like on average, I average about 30 hours a week. So some weeks, if it's depending on my client load, etc., might be 27. If there's a holiday or something like that, it might be like 25. And then on other weeks, it might be like 35 or something like that. But usually between, I'd say 27 and 33 hours is what I put into my business. That's what I do, and that's great with me. I have my other time set aside, and I found that I can earn a very nice full-time 6-figure income in that amount of time. And even depending on the client load, that's why I say it can fluctuate and get a little smaller, because I know what needs to be done on a daily basis. And if I don't have a lot of client load, that's when my hours can actually go down, because there's only so much follow-up you can do. And so I did want to give you some groundwork in terms of like a number. It doesn't mean that, all I have to put in is, let's say 30 hours a week into my coaching business to get full-time. I don't want to give you that impression necessarily. I'm just saying that right now, depending on what you have, don't think about the number per se, but more of when do I have my time where I can do my business. That's the biggest piece of it right there. Next thing I want to talk about when it goes into scheduling, and I'll get into some specifics in a short bit, but this foundational stuff is so important. Your business hours become uncompromisable. This is important. Uncompromisable. What does uncompromisable mean? Well, just exactly what it says. Uncompromisable means I do not compromise it. I do not compromise my business time for anything. Just the same, the other things in my life, my other times, like my workout time, typically 9 or 9:15 in the morning till like about 10:15 in the morning, right? Through the week. That's my uncompromisable workout time. Meaning, if I get a client and says, I can do, whatever, Wednesday morning at 9 a.m., and that's when I go to my yoga class, for instance, I don't say yes. I say that doesn't work for me, but this does. So it's so important that just as your business hours are uncompromisable, your other elements in your life that are foundationally important, time with family, etc., fun time, alone time, workout time, whatever it is there, like those important pieces, they become uncompromisable. I mean, you don't sacrifice one for the other. And obviously the only situation is if, for emergencies and stuff that's really, really like, whoa, this is unordinarily important. Okay, now I can compromise. And the great thing about being an entrepreneur is, especially as you are more and more on your own, you have the ability to compromise, but I go back to the treating it like a job, meaning it's like, well, you just don't want to just take the week off all the time, or you just compromise all the time, because then all of a sudden it's you just keep shuffling things around, and the more you compromise, the less consistent you are. And we're going for consistency, and a lot of entrepreneurs, they have this idea of entrepreneurship, and it's like, I own my own time and I can do what I want. And it's like I can get up and I walk, 15 feet, down my hallway, and I can be in my office, right, in my pajamas, and I can work there, and I can do what I want when I want. And it's like, well, yeah, you have that ability. However, if you're going to be successful with it, you've got to start bringing these parameters in like it's a job. Meaning, if you were your own employee, would you keep you or would you fire you based on your performance in your business? Showing up on time, honoring your business hours, those types of things. So I want you to go back to that uncompromisable piece, and it's not just for our business hours, but it's for our other hours as well. And that brings that consistency in. And we need that consistency because in order to move forward with something, it's small efforts over a long period of time. It's not any one effort. It's small, consistent efforts over a period of time. That's all that is. So with that being said, and that uncompromisable time, now we start to look at our business hours itself and recognize how are we actually going to move our business forward, and another philosophy behind that. And what I'm going to say about this is that in order to really be successful in terms of these small efforts over time, especially if you have a lot of other responsibilities, including a job, for instance, you're going to need to have a focus on your business. Okay, duh, Jeff. Let me elaborate on that. What I mean by a focus on your business is people got a lot of stuff going on in their lives. Let's say it like that. And correct me if I'm wrong, at least the way I look at it, anyone who is wildly successful at something in their world, could be an athlete, it could be someone in their career, or let's say a relationship, etc. If we really looked at their life, it's out of balance. Out of balance in the sense that odds are they put the majority of their energy and effort and time and money and resources into that one area. Unfortunately, what typically happens is if that's way out of balance, we can really excel in one area, but then often what happens is obviously other areas of our life can start to decline, etc. And then we might have a fantastically rocking business, but our spouse is leaving us, or we don't have a relationship with our kids, or you fill in the blank, or you have a heart attack because your health has declined. So the objective here is where I like to go by, and a lot of the stuff I actually wrote on my book I published years ago, Being Fulfilled. This is what I talk about in there. And this is an important aspect in terms of scheduling because it comes down to a philosophy basis. This is why I'm sharing this foundational piece before I get into some more of the details of it, of what happens in the business hours, which I'll get there. So in other words, we can't be neglecting these areas, but with that in mind, a lot of people are going for this nice, happily balanced work-life thing that is just okay, but if we're really looking at it, and I think we're being truthful about it, you're really not going to make much progress on your business if it's just this perfectly balanced piece. In other words, in order to move your business forward, I'll say it like this. You deserve to be spending most of your energy, most of your time on your business. That's just the reality. With that in mind, I want to say we want to do that without neglecting the other few important areas, and I would say health and relationships. All right, we don't want to neglect them. We don't let our health go. We don't let relationships go. But if we're going to really move our business forward, there's going to have to be some sacrifice. Therefore, in order for you to effectively do this, and this goes back to the amount of hours we have, especially if you've got a full-time job, and I bring that up a lot because it's an important piece. But even if you don't, I'm sure your hours are very well taken care of, and sought after, even if you don't have a full-time job. Meaning, people, things you're responsible for. But if you're going to do that, you're going to have to start looking at what you're involved in terms of what you can stop, what you can postpone, what you can delegate, what you can ask for help or hire help on. And it's there's a lot of things that you do. But right now, if you really want your business to go, and you're just starting to crank on that flywheel, that thing is big and rusty and slow and old, and it is just not moving at all. And it takes a lot of effort just to get a little bit of movement in that flywheel, so to speak. So we need that energy and that focus there. We've got to start saying, what am I stopping? What am I delegating? What am I postponing? It doesn't mean you're quitting it for life. It means that right now you shouldn't be doing this. When I wrote my book, speaking of that back in 2009, when I was writing it, it was, during the summer, and it was I had to do the same thing. I had to, talk to my wife at that time and be like, hey, listen, I need some help. I need, when I'm done with my work, I've got to actually, because I still do my business, I've got to write. I've got to go to the library and write. So I need support from her on that piece. I was a cyclist. I raced, and I didn't ride that season, and it was really hard going into the library in the middle of August. That's beautiful up in New England, when all my friends literally are riding by the library windows on this beautiful summer day, and I'm sitting in the library, typing my book. But it doesn't mean I stopped cycling. It just means I had to postpone that for that season. And there are a lot of other examples that I had to do in my world to clear the space and to find the time, if you will, to dedicate, to focus on get that going. So I gave up things, but if I was actually going to accomplish it and get it off the ground, that's what I needed to do. And I want to give you that example. The same here is, so wherever you're at in your world with what you're looking to do, you've got to start to look at it and say, all right, well, what are my business hours? Where are my other hours? And if you notice, I'm bringing this into your whole world. This isn't just about your business hours, because remember, we've got to honor that other space of our life. But where are my other uncompromisable times? Let's say for my workouts or for my spend with my kids, etc. And so when those are, and that's also going to help set your boundaries for your work hours. So especially you're working from home, and let's say you got kids around, or you've got other people, in your world, in your house. You've got to know, like, is mom or dad working, or are they playing, right? So if you've got work hours, then that needs to be very clear what those work hours mean. And it's like you don't exist in those work hours, and you've got to honor them just as much as other people have to honor them. So the reason I'm going through this stuff before I go into any specifics is because you could set up your work hours, but if you don't honor those things, well, you're never going to get them done. Meaning, just as much as they, let's say, can't come into the room and talk to you or bother you or whatever, you can't say, oh, these are my business hours, and then all of a sudden be like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing, or blah, 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 and I'm going to go downstairs and get a drink, and all of a sudden you're like talking with them and playing with them or whatever. It's like, that's not cool. Like, you've got to be disciplined about this. And I want to convey to you the I don't know what better word than rigidness, or better maybe disciplinedness, if that's a word, of this. If you're going to really do this full time, you've got to create this discipline. You've got to create these rigid boundaries that you do not break in order to create this. There'll be moments where you can have flexibility. There'll be moments where you're not disciplined. That's just, no one's perfect like that. However, it's most of the time you've got to be disciplined, and especially early on, you can't let your guard down, because, like I said, that imaginary flywheel, it's just like the thing's got no momentum. You've got to crank on it or two, but you've been doing it for a month or two. That's nothing. It's like, you get 100 pounds to lose. It's like you go to the gym for a couple of weeks. It's nothing. Even a year, a couple of years, it's really nothing, because you spent the last 30, 40 years of your life getting fat, and now you're just a couple of years working out. It's like, okay, we got to keep going, right? It's the same thing with your business. We've got to keep this going. So I want to represent that discipline. I often compare it to fitness, because I came from the fitness industry, personal training, and so forth and so on. So, the comparison of eating better, and it's like, oh well, on the weekends I can eat whatever I want. It's like, no, you can't. If you're eating well, you eat well. I'm not saying all or nothing, but I'm saying it's like, yeah, have your moment, but not your days or your weekends. It's like, be disciplined. And I really want to represent that with my education today, is find those boundaries, create those boundaries, and set those up very importantly. So now I give you the uncompromisable time, not only for your business, but your relationships and all the other important pieces of your life. Now let's get into some more of the details in terms of, okay, what happens in my business hours? So when it comes to like what we schedule, like I'll just say how I operate, and this is how I recommend for other people. The great part about the rigidness and the discipline that I'm talking about is that once you get into the hour block, not 1 hour block necessarily, but my business hour block, whether it's 1 hour or 10 hours, right? Whatever I'm in that, or maybe I'm in my relationship block, or my son, time with my son, right? Or my workout block, right? Once I'm in that, I know what's required of me, right? Like it's my time to work out. It's my time to just play and have fun, meaning my business is done, and now it's time to play. Like today at 3 o'clock, I'm done. I go get my son at 3:15, and from 3:15 till I go to bed, I'm playing. I'm with my son, and It doesn't matter what we do. So what I'm expressing here is there's freedom within the block. So when it's your business hours, I don't want you to necessarily have to think like, oh, there's a right or wrong into what I do first, second, third, et cetera, but rather if I've got the next 3 hours for my business, number one, all I'm doing is stuff for my business, not folding laundry, not, you know what I mean? Not personal stuff. But then I have freedom within that block. And that's what I want to express there is that's where you've got that freedom. Now you do become your own boss. You do own your own time. Now we don't know what can get done in that time, all right? I play it like this. Unless there's something specific I need to get done for a client or for the business, et cetera, I will schedule clients anytime within my business hours. I never go outside of my business hours. So that's one thing, but it doesn't matter when I schedule clients. What I aim to do is, however, I aim to schedule them at certain times, meaning I said I start my day at 11 a.m. So what I always try and do is schedule a client for 11 a.m. There's a few days I can start at 10:30 because my workout ends a little early, so I can get there and be in the office by 10:30. But whatever that start time is, I always try and schedule a client to start because I found for myself, if I've got 11 o'clock start time and I don't have a client, well then if my shower didn't happen and I didn't eat and it just, there's no one waiting for me in my office, in my house at 11 a.m. 11 a.m. can turn into 11:30 or whatever the heck I want it to be, right? Because no one's there to hold me accountable. And let's face it, I mean, I love to be disciplined, but I also know that I'm not that disciplined. And what I need to create the discipline is some of the structure around it. And that's what I want to show to you is, I don't want to give you this impression, well, if you got it, great. It's not a bad thing that, oh, Jeff's disciplined. But I want to also share with you the reality is I'm not disciplined at all. You put a bag of Oreos, I'll eat them till I'm sick. But the point is, double stuff, by the way. Anyway, the point is that I need that accountability, so I will schedule clients at 11 a.m. or 10:30. So, because that gets my ass in the shower and fed and dressed and ready by the time my client calls. And once my client calls, now I'm working, right? Now I'm in a zone and that gets me in there and that gets me going. So that's been my strategy. Maybe for you, you're fine getting in there, and maybe for you, you're like, oh, I want to get in there and I want to, take care of emails. I want to follow up with people. I'm fresh in the morning, and that's my time where I want to block off that first hour for just, following up or marketing or my emails, things like that. Then, in other words, I'm not saying there's a right or wrong, but again, if you notice, I'm going back to understanding how you operate best, and maybe you don't know yet. That's okay. The things I'm telling you about right now, I've been doing this full time since 2004. So I've understood if I don't schedule a client at 11 a.m., and there are days where, maybe I don't have a client scheduled because there was no client to schedule then, but I noticed if I didn't do that, I'm less likely to be disciplined enough to get in and start by 11 a.m. So that's part of my focus there. And so that's what I want to give to you is how does that work? Another thing that I like to do is I also like to schedule a client at the end of my day. So for instance, today is a shorter day, my Tuesdays, because I start at 11 and then I, like I said, I stop at 3 so I can get my son. So it's a shorter day for me, but I want to schedule a client at 11 and schedule one at 2 o'clock. I've always got my Tuesday call. So what that does is no matter what day it is, it keeps me in the office. Like I scheduled I work later on Thursday evenings and Wednesday evenings. And so I scheduled like some of my group calls that I have. I scheduled them later on to the end of my day. And what that does is it forces me to stay in my office because I've got work coming. And what that also does is I know that I don't just have free hours at the end of my day. So if I've got work to do and the things I've got to get done, whatever free blocks I have where I don't have clients during the day, well, now it forces me to kind of get that work done because I've got to stop because then I've got, let's say, 3, 4, 5 calls, et cetera. And then it's, 6:30 or 7 o'clock at night. And at that point, I'm done. I don't want to have to stay in my office and miss out on fun time or sun time or whatever time that I've got scheduled because it's number one, it's uncompromisable. And number two is I don't have to stay in the office because I was just too lazy and couldn't focus at getting the stuff done earlier, right? So that motivates me to kind of get that stuff done. And again, I'm just giving examples for myself so you can start to go with from yourself is to say, okay, well, all right, well, how do I operate best? If I scheduled, start off with my examples, a client at the beginning or the end of my day, how would that work? Sometimes right away you don't have clients. It's like, oh, Jeff, I'd love to do that, but I don't have clients. So what do I do? Right? So then it just looked at some of the other activities, in your business and start to figure out, which ones do you need a certain amount of focus on? Like, think about it like this. If let's say you're filming yourself, you're doing a call, a podcast recording, a video, etc., and or you're doing some things like out loud like that. Well, think when might be the best time for that. If you're filming, maybe you need it more during the day because you need natural light, from the windows, etc. Or if your kids are off at school for a certain amount of time, or someone else in the house and they're gone, every day at a certain time, maybe that's the time where you can film or whatever, because now you're not worried about someone knocking at the door or outside noise, right? So I'm trying to give you different strategies on how you can start to think about how you can operate and do things. And then also thinking about how you operate in terms of time blocks, like, long periods of time. In other words, like I can operate for long periods of time if I'm with clients, but if I've just got like 5 hours of my day where I don't have clients and it's just business stuff, that's when I tend to fade a little bit more. So what I got to do is those times, that's when at the beginning of that, I will use that for follow-up time. And because when I get in a zone following up with people, hopefully as a result of that, I try and see if I can schedule something. I can try and see if I can schedule a call, or if I'm following up with somebody and it seems like the follow-up's going well and I've got their number, that's when I might actually just call them up or say, hey, do you have a moment to chat? I'd love to, instead of going via email or messenger, for instance, I'll just, hey, do you have a moment to chat? And then I'll get on the phone with them, and so I know that's where I can start to focus, and I'm good with follow-ups, especially when I've got larger chunks of time, as opposed to getting involved in other different projects, or little things in the business. I start getting into follow-up because I've found usually that leads me to me getting on the phone with somebody, and usually that leads me to, getting a brand new client or scheduling a call even for later in that day, and then I can get a client as a result of that. So that's how I start to use my strategy. But for you, start to think about, in terms of functioning best, if you've got the time where you have like 4 or 5 hour blocks during the day in a row, doesn't mean you have to have that as your full time. Maybe you work for 3 hours and maybe you take an hour off. You do some lunch, maybe you do your exercise, maybe you do some housework so that you have another few hours, let's say before the kids or whoever gets home. And this way, if you know that housework is done and whatever else, then you're going to be more focused to be spending it with them. So again, you have the flexibility for that. And like I said, don't think you need to be spending, 8 hours straight in your office just because you're supposed to. Block off your time appropriately, just making sure that whatever time you have, you need to make sure you stay focused in that time. In terms of just giving a little bit more specific before we open it up for some thoughts, when I think about my day, I'll break it down like this in terms of more specifics. So now I'm in my business hours. Obviously, I've got my clients, right? Maybe you don't have any clients right now, but ultimately I find that your clients would probably at the most are going to represent maybe at the most 1/3 of your time. So if I'm going off of my 30-hour work week as an example, 10 of those hours are going to be clients that I have. And what I found is, whether it's in a group or one-on-one, a great load that I can handle over time is like 10 to 12 clients. And some people might say like, 10 to 12 clients, really? That's all you can handle? I can handle a lot more. I've had weeks where I've had many more than that. The difference is that a week of 30 plus clients, 30 hours of coaching clients, etc., or more, let's say, followed by another week of that, by that third week, done, just done. That's a lot to handle. Even after a couple weeks, that's a lot. So I found that load of about 10 to 12 or so works really well because it allows me to really service my clients, be there for my clients, respond with my clients, but then also it gives me the space to do my marketing, to do my follow-ups, and that's the other 2/3 or just slightly less than that is marketing and follow-up. Like literally, that's your coaching business is going to be primarily, instead of 66% marketing, I'd say like maybe 60%, because the other 6% would just be miscellaneous tasks like invoicing and finances and scheduling and just stuff like that just take up time, and they happen whenever they happen. But that 60 plus percent, if you will, is that marketing. And that marketing piece, when I say marketing, there's the passive marketing, which is be more paid marketing, like Facebook ads. And then there's the active marketing, which is more of I'm actively creating something, like I'm actively doing this call. This Tuesday call, this is marketing for me, right? I'm educating, but as a coach, my philosophy is education-based marketing. We don't market our coaching services. That's a lot of coaches, they go wrong. They market their coaching services. We're not selling coaching. That's the name of my business, right? Selling coaching. But what we're doing is we're selling a solution through our education. So that's our marketing is our education. So we educate people, and through that they start to understand the value and how we can assist them. Like some of you sit there and listen to me talk and educate you around this stuff. Depending on your position, you might be in that spot where you go, wow, Jeff could help me. Because you start to see how I can help you through what I share, et cetera. And that begins to build value for, let's say, hiring me as your mentor coach. Same thing with you. As you start to educate your audience and be in front of them, those are your marketing efforts, right? Whether you're doing it through a call like this, a live event, like I talked about why I wanted you on my email list so you can start to see how I market to my audience. It's not me saying, hey, hire me as your coach and blah, blah, blah. It's me educating. Hey, come to my call. I invite them to things. I invite them to my Facebook group. I serve my audience. And through that service, it builds value for working with me when the timing and the need is there. And that's what I want you to be able to do. But that's the 60% of your business. Is there a right or wrong time to do it? No. When do you do it? It needs to get done. Meaning we want to come up with a structure. And again, that's why I start to work with my one-on-one mentoring clients, is helping them with more of a structure of their marketing. I typically like to revolve that around a live event. Like I have my Tuesday call. Obviously, you're on it or listening to it. But I revolve my marketing around my Tuesday call. So that what that does is, well, when do I email my audience, right? When do I post something in my Facebook group? Or when do I do that stuff? Well, now I know, as an example, for instance, like on Mondays, well, I've got to come up with my Tuesday call topic. And I've got to set an event up in my Facebook group and on my Facebook page. I've got to send an email out to my audience. And then when I've composed my email, the story that I open with, I take that story, depending on what it is and how applicable it is. I then take that story without the call to action of my call, because it's a great story and a point for coaches, and I will then go post that in 6 or 7 different, for instance, Facebook groups that I'm in, and that gets me exposure, and ultimately people that read it and comments it, they might migrate over to my group, they might find themselves on my website, and that's how I start to grow my audience. That's how maybe I start to get people on live calls like this. See, that's that active marketing, but that stuff takes time. But what it does is that allows me to say, okay, on Monday, I know I need to do those things. Event in both, Facebook page and group, email, take the email, post it on those other pieces. Like those are my main marketing activities. Outside of that, my other marketing activities are following up. So it's like when people come into my Facebook group, every single person, maybe not immediately, but at some point, I send them a welcome message, personal message. Hey, saw you in my group. Thanks so much for coming. Curious your motivation for wanting to join, and how did you hear about me? And that's where I get clients from, right? I start conversations with people and see where they go, right? That's that active marketing. The paid Facebook ads that I run those on a daily basis. I've been running them for the last year and a half. So as those people come in and they get my free offer, my ultimate startup guide for new coaches that I mentioned about on the front page of my website, they get the email that I send to them automatically, and I ask them questions. Some respond, some don't. But the ones that respond, I get back to them and I start a conversation with them and see where it leads to, right? This is where I start to monetize, if you will, my marketing activities through these conversations. And so again, there's never any right or wrong time for that stuff, but it needs to get done. So I make sure that I know when I come into my office, Here's my client load. Here's what I've got for free space. Here are the things that are required of me, like on a day like a Monday where I got those things I mentioned, or on a Friday, for instance. By the end of the day, I've got to make sure I get my administrative stuff, meaning I've got to get my call produced into a video, uploaded to YouTube, posted on my website, and then I've got to send an email to my audience, and I've got to get in my Facebook group and my Facebook page and say, hey, everybody, the call recording's here. Right? Those are my must-dos. So whatever I've got going on for client load that day, I've got to find space, somewhere in there where I can get those mandatories done. And so that allows me, it doesn't matter where or when I get that done, I just got to get that done. And that's the objective of it, especially when I follow up with people. I follow up with people and then they follow back up with me, and so I know, okay, so-and-so responded. I've got to get to that. When do I get to that? Well, the first free moment that I can, right? That's how you've got to roll with it. And so that's why when you're disciplined and you have your office hours, that's now you know when you could be doing things. So if after this, for instance, if I didn't have a client, I would make sure that if I had a free hour that I've got some bullet points listed of priority things that I need to do. And anything else that's not revenue producing, like I said, that's going to lead me towards either speaking in front of people or following up with people, that stuff has to wait, because that's the stuff that's not going to lead to me getting paid. It's me interacting with people. That's the really important component of it. And if right now, the last thing I'll say before I close, if you're finding that the time you have allocated for your business, meaning your business hours, as you start to do these activities, if you notice that there's less and less time, meaning, geez, I've maxed out the time that I can do for my business hours, and then the stuff that's required of me is more, especially right now, let's say maybe you're able to fit in 10 hours a week because of your job or something like that. And then now all of a sudden you don't have any clients, but now you got 5 clients. Well, all the 10 hours you had before are cut in half because you've got paying clients. So now we got to make sure those marketing activities don't get cut off. Otherwise, as your clients end, you're just going to wind up with no business, and then starting that flywheel back up again. So we've got to be cognizant of that space as well.